Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the State Library for the second in the Game Changer series for 2013. My name is Peter Little. I'm a Deputy Vice-Chancellor at QUT and also a member of the Governing Committee of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting tonight and pay our respects to their ancestors who came before them. The location of the State Library on Kurilpa Point was historically a significant meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and we proudly continue that tradition here today. I also acknowledge Jeanette Wright, the State Librarian, Ray Weeks, our distinguished businessman and chair for the evening, who's CEO of the chairman of the CEO Institute, formerly CEO of Castlemaine Perkins, and prior to that, Rothmans Holdings, and our special guest, Heath Goddard, founder and managing director of Pillage. I also welcome members of the Queensland Library Board, Queensland Library Foundation, QUT Business School, and the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Governing Committee, and our generous donors and partners, Origin, Crow Horwath, Channel 7 and 4BC. I congratulate the State Library for initiating this series as an extension of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame program. In fact, it's great to see so many people here in the library for this series tonight and in the previous Game Changer interview a few weeks ago, because the State Library of Queensland, for those of you who don't know, is a game changer itself in the library space, and it's trying to be an innovative and outstanding library in Australia, and finding interesting and new ways to engage the public in not just literacy but thought leadership across a range of areas. The State Library is very committed to promoting business concepts, but in particular its business collection and recording and celebrating Queensland's business history, which we're doing through the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame. But tonight our journey is to share with Heath Goddard his story and his journey as founder and managing director of Pillage. And it hardly needs to be said that we live in very difficult times for business, but in particular for retailers. And we've asked Heath to be our guest tonight because he is an outstanding entrepreneur and Queensland businessman, running a wonderful business based in Queensland and thriving when so many other retailers are struggling to survive, let alone to thrive. So we're very much looking forward to your time with us tonight, Heath, and to sharing your ideas on being a game changer, being a successful entrepreneur in very difficult and challenging business times. So would you please welcome Ray and Heath to the stage.
If I could just say a few words as well. Welcome to the second of our Game Changer series events. This Game Changer series, as Peter was alluding to, is all about bringing leaders in innovation, our great Queensland entrepreneurs, the ones who have built remarkable, successful national and international businesses, here to share with us their stories, their insights, the lessons that they've learned along the way. We're here to understand how these entrepreneurs build their companies. This is what the Game Changer series event's all about, how they engender creativity, how they inspire their teams, how they manage the dynamics of change, and how they drive growth. We'll hear about the leadership attributes required in this entrepreneurial space. We, as Peter said, we live in reasonably uncertain and tough economic times in a number of ways also, but it's also that we live in I think highly risk-averse and conservative times. When I talk to a number of CEOs, there's a lot of caution, there's a lot of risk aversion, which is not the characteristics that we think about when we talk about entrepreneurs. We need the game changers. Another reason we need to understand what works for successful entrepreneurs is because, as I said to you that last time, they're the ones more likely to create the jobs. Expectations are that entrepreneurs are twice as likely to hire people as against corporates. And Heath Goddard, as Peter said, is founder, CEO, owner of Pillow Talk. He'll take us on his personal journey from a small store in Brisbane's Ann Street in 1977. Heath has grown Pillow Talk into a national retail chain. He'll also take us through his expansionary strategy at the same time as the retail industry, as Peter said, is being rocked by online shopping and a tough economy. He'll also speak to what distinguishes Pillow Talk from its competitors, its visual merchandising policy, and also its strong design philosophy. Pillow Talk's a great success story over many decades, and that's why Heath Goddard is here tonight to give us his take on his personal journey, his understanding of what's worked for him and what hasn't, and also as an entrepreneur, as a game changer. Would you please welcome Heath Goddard?
Right.
I mentioned your personal journey. Heath, can you take us on your personal journey? You mentioned an 8-year-old at a boarding school at one stage.
Yes, I started life in southeast Queensland, extracted from Western Queensland. At that stage, it was a burgeoning cattle business because in 1965, all the stock on the property died in a drought. So I left home at the age of 8. I remember the time when I was taken down. I won't bore you for too long, but the first time I came down to the Gold Coast, when you've come through a drought and you've lost all your production unit, called your sheep, you're very conscious of water. Anyway, I can recall coming into Southport, and we came down onto the Labrador area and the Broadwater, and my first impression was, crikey, this bugger's rich, look at all that water, not realising it was the ocean. From that point on, I was ensconced in the Southport School for about 9 years, I think it was, before I was let out. But it was a fairly harrowing time when you're sort of tugged away from the scrub and then you're brought into a fairly rough and ready boarding school environment, as the Southport School was. If you ever want to learn politics and gang warfare at the same time, a boarding school is an excellent place to practice the art, because you do learn an awful lot. And quite frankly, if you want to go and take it a bit further, it's a very good educational structure for business later on down the track, because you are imbibing, in a certain way, a whole host of practical issues in terms of how you then can conduct your life later on. I don't know if I can add a lot more about being a boarder. Go on.
We'll come back to your personal journey later beyond that. But you came to Brisbane with, I think, about $998. How did you initially finance your business?
Well, I did spend 7 years at Myer before we went out and started it, because don't think I was the sole principle of getting Pillow Talk out of the ground. I certainly wasn't. I was in cahoots with a gentleman called Roy King, who's still a partner, even though he retired quite a few years ago. But what we did when we started Pillow Talk, I suppose, if you want to go along with that, we got something you probably can't get today, and that was an enormous amount of support from supply. In today's age, that wouldn't be probably available, because there was trust, there was an opportunity to present your case. The whole industry was different. You got the opportunity to work with your suppliers, and they gave you a bit more latitude. So we didn't have too much of a borrowing structure. We had a small arrangement with the bank. We're still with the bank. And in the main, I suppose I lived off my wits. We had to be fairly accurate at our assessment of what we could do. I can broaden that by saying that when we left from the umbrella of the company I was working with at the time was Myer, when you walk away from that into your own network, you quickly realise how little you know and how little support you have. When you're in a large corporation, there's an awful lot of protection. Once you're out on your own, there's a wide range of none. And mistakes are all yours, and you've got to be pretty quick on your feet to rectify them, or otherwise you're not there in a short space of time. So but we did it through cash flow and supplier support. That's how we started. But I didn't go straight from coming from the country working. I had spent 7 years in a large corporation, and I learned an awful lot in that corporation. I came down as what they call a trainee manager. I was going to go and do law. I didn't. I came straight into the retail environment, and I suppose even back in, well, it was back in the early 70s, the retail environment in Queensland was a bit more of a hillbilly show than it would be considered today. You make decisions when you start your working career. The decisions I made in Myer were probably A, lucky, but B, correct, because I stayed in one product category. When you go and join these corporations and they want to move you around to all sorts of areas, I chose not to do it. Just as a rough guide as to how I got into the home linens field, when I went to meet the personnel manager, the gentleman said to me, "What area would you like to work in?" And I was, being a boy, I said I wouldn't mind doing either sporting goods or menswear. And he said, we can get any amount of people going into those areas. And I said, oh, okay. So we can't get anyone to go into the Manchester field. I said, what's Manchester? Seriously, I had no idea, never heard of the word. And he said, that's sheets and towels. And I said, no one will go there. He said, no one will go into that area. I said, well, I'll go there then. My logic, as I was just turned 18, was if there's no one there, there's less competition, I might make a go of it. So that's what I did. Then, once you were in those particular, and as it happened, I was fortunate I was in their head office store, which in those days was the Fortitude Valley location. It eventually was shut down. But all the management structure was there, all the advertising was there, and I stayed in the one product category. I looked around and thought, who's making a go of it? And again, it was, I thought, ear, nose and throat specialists are only doing one part of the body, so I'll just do one part of the product category. I won't go here, I won't go there, I'll stay here and I'll learn all about it. So I was making these strange decisions as a fairly young person, but that's what happened, and then I proceeded on from there. I had the luxury and the opportunity to be across all facets of the retailing business, and that's advertising, ticket writing, wheeling barrows across the street, unloading stuff, and working probably 13-hour days, which was fantastic because that's what you have to do.
Tell us about some of the market shifts, some of those key inflection points in the market that you took advantage of against your competitors.
Yes, well, probably that would be, they were evident before we actually left Myer, and I think we could claim, and I have to be careful here, but I think we could probably claim, these days most people sleep under what we call a continental quilt or a doona. That item was not prevalent in 1977, it was being spoken about. We chose to leave Myer and set up a specialty retail business predicated around that particular product. That gave us a starting point, an edge, and I think that's relevant today. If you've got something that can give you an edge or a start, that gives you a chance to be somewhat different to the great morass of what's confronting everyone today. There's no shortage of competition, there's no shortage of merchandise. So for us, that gave us the first little bit of a difference. We made plenty of mistakes, and we were probably in strife midway through 1977, early 1978, but that item would be what I would hang my hat on as a starting point, and we saw that as an opportunity. We had done a couple of things in Myer which had, if you want to talk about game changers, changed the game for Myer in marketing. And one of them was we actually advertised in colour, which was a complete unheard of thing in 1977 because most advertising was black and white with perhaps a splash of red if you wanted to be really outrageous. We did a couple of coloured advertisements in that particular time, and it broke every known record of sales in the Myer business. So much so that it got down to Myer Melbourne, and they wondered where the hell Queensland was. What have they done? And they then started to embrace it. But at around that time, my partner in crime, Roy King, was anxious to go out on his own. He was a senior executive in the Myer homewares business, and he said, I'm going to go. And the reason I was probably contemplating not being in Myer anymore was they were bringing in a lot of graduates. Nothing against graduates, but I was training them how to be retailers, and I thought, this is a bit weird. I'm telling them how to take my job, so I might as well get out of here. And so at that point, Roy said, well, I think we can do something about this whole concept that's in front of us. And I said, let's go and do it. So there we are. That's how we started, and then there was a whole progression from there.
Well, let's talk about the progression. How have you managed the growth of Pillow Talk and the transition and from a startup to a national retail chain? Rightio.
We began it with, as you say, 2 shops. We opened 2 stores on the same day. We were scroungers, so we were very, very conscious of cost. Right from day one, we were conscious of what it cost us to set a store up, what it cost us to run it, and off we went with a couple of stores. We were very fortunate, harking back to my comment about coloured advertising. In those days, the Sunday Mail was a, what do you call them, a broadsheet. Wasn't a tabloid. And there happened to be a magazine in that paper called the Sunday Mail Colour Magazine. But only one page had colour on it. That was the back page. And they could never sell it to anyone. Could not give it away. And I remember the gentleman who came to see us, and we were in the Ann Street shop, and he said, we can't give this to anyone, it's colour. I said, righto, how much do you want for it? It's normally $2,600. I said, what if we took it every day from now to the end of the year and we gave you a 5-year contract on it? What can we have it for? So we did a deal. That was the start of getting it right. So it was a bit of a punt, but we did it. And again, my obscure logic for doing that was, it sat in the middle of this broadsheet of the paper. When you open the paper, this thing fell out. When something falls out, it goes up or down. We had a 50-50 chance of being seen. That's what we did. And it worked forever. When Rupert took the paper to a tabloid, I said, I don't want that space anymore, because then it was page 111. Not interested. And that was about, I don't know, mid-80s. So that was the start of what we did. As we then, we did have probably, I remember when we first started, now I won't talk sales normally, but we thought if we could ever get to $1 million in turnover, ever in the whole company's history, that'd be something unbelievable. Well, we had more success than that. We were successful, and one of our great strengths, I think, was that we always reinvested back in ourselves. We didn't waste the money, we put it back into stock, and as we had enough funds, we then used those funds to open another store. And so we piggybacked along on top of our own success in turnovers.
Just give us an idea of the scale of your business today, number of stores. You don't have to talk about revenue, but just number of employees and so on.
Yeah, well I'll probably do it in a slightly different fashion, if I may. This time last year, we had 31 stores, and we had a reasonably solid turnover, and we've been running fairly well for probably 15 to 20 years. By the end of August this year, the beginning of August this year, we'll have probably 47. And what we've done normally is expand very slowly, and most of our expansion has come when the world's in a pickle, not when it's flying well. I remember a good friend of mine who's a partner in a major legal firm here in town, and he always had a lot of work with the Japanese in the 80s and everything else, and I could never understand their philosophy. They always seemed to buy when things were going up. And then they'd be buying right at the top of the pile, and then it'd go down, so they'd get out. He was happy with that because he took a commission on the way up with his fees and one on the way down. But I couldn't work it out because I thought, well, they're paying a premium price. Our philosophy has probably been to be brave enough to do something when things aren't good, which is counter-cyclical. And that's what we've always tried to do, work against the run of play. And to date, it's been okay. We'll no doubt touch on a bit more of this as we go along.
We will. We'll come back to your expansionary strategy and some implications surrounding that. Come back to it. Do you think innovation is more difficult today than any other time?
I think if you're not innovating even more now, you're in strife. We're talking retail, that's my game. I think we've almost got to reinvent ourselves every couple of years. I don't think I'll get into trouble here. I look at a business like Billabong at the moment, and this only occurred to me about our company when I was reading the travails that Billabong are currently enjoying. And I thought about it, and Billabong was a company that really hit its straps through the 80s. The only problem with that is a lot of the people who are the Billabong's #1 customers are now about as old as I am. And they didn't go back to the well 15 or 20 years ago, I don't believe, to get a new pile of people on board. So as the pace of life goes the way it does, innovation or reinventing yourself is probably fairly critical as a business, because as we move through the time, and I know you're going to touch on online retailing and things like this. So it's a tricky measure, because businesses have a profile, they have a concept, they are what they are, but if you're not engaging with the next generation of people, you will run out of your customers. They end up in boxes and go off into the whatever. So that's a minor problem. Sorry, I shouldn't. But I beg your pardon, what was that? But that's what you need to be thinking about, is not just who you're dealing with now, but the people who you're not dealing with who are still coming through. So I think in reinventing yourself, or hearkening back to what you were, and then pick up the next pile.
But you've kept the concept right.
Oh yes.
Through that process of reinventing yourself.
Yeah, you can't. I would observe in my business efforts, whenever I walk into a business and it's moved too far away from its central theme, it's probably not too far from not being there. You've got to maintain what you do. By all means, work away from it in a small way, but don't rush off into a completely different tangent, because it won't happen. You won't have the skill set to work with that new area. I often think of large corporations, and it's happened plenty of times. I remember when Myer bought Red Rooster. They weren't much good at selling fast chickens and things. That business failed quite quickly because they just didn't get it right. They went outside their area of expertise. That was quite a while ago. But I would be observing that even in what we do. You can build on your central theme, but don't suddenly go off on a violently different tangent. It will tend to burn you.
We once adopted a diversification strategy. This is when I was with Rothmans, thinking that we had, and we said we've got the marketing skills, so we can apply those marketing skills to any product category. Disastrous.
I'd just like to touch on something. This is one. I read a book by Jack Keogh, who was the head of Coca-Cola, touching on this subject of going outside your major area of expertise. And I was reflecting on it to some of the people in the office this afternoon. In the mid-80s, Coca-Cola, as big as they are and as fantastic as they are, they thought, what are we in? We're in the drink business. What's a drink? Wine. So what are we going to do? They decided they'd get into the wine business. They had plenty of money in their back pocket. So they went out to the Napa Valley and they bought the wine industry. It was extremely good for their ego. Wonderful. They were suddenly involved with movie stars, opening nights, you name it. And they were terribly pleased with themselves and spent billions of dollars acquiring this fantastic wine industry. Needless to say, the original gentleman who was accredited with being the founder of Coke used to come to the board meetings, and they were giving themselves a pat on the back, and he said, oh God, I wouldn't mind seeing that. I won't do that any further. But they got the company jet and they flew him out to Los Angeles, and he went and had a look at this wine business. And he said, and he looked at the farms, and he looked at the distilleries and everything else, and he came back and he reported to the meeting. He said, that wine industry is amazing. He said, I just can't understand how fantastic it is. He said, you buy some land and you plant vines, and 6 or 7 years later you pick the grapes and you do it by hand, and you take them to this place and you put it in vats, and then you put it in bottles, and you get some smart bloke to make a fancy label, and after about 6 or 7 years you get your money back. He said, I like our process. He said, we put flavouring in water with some sugar on Wednesday and our cash is back in the bank by Thursday. They sold that business straight away. The message came through. So in terms of knowing your onions, doing what you should do, that was an interesting lesson from a rather large corporation versus mine.
Let's go to online shopping. How have you maintained and grown your business in spite of what some would see as the boom in online shopping?
Yeah, well, I think Australian retail has been castigated well and truly in the last year and a bit by being rather slack at picking up on online retail and having the foresight to get into it. I'm right in the middle of trying to implement a new online platform. If I'd known this time last year the pain and suffering that I was going to go through, I wouldn't have done it, and this time next year you wouldn't be talking to me. It's critical for businesses, especially retail businesses that are bricks and mortar, to be embracing that particular facet of retail. It is going to do so much for engendering knowledge, product knowledge, letting people, for want of a word, sniff you, see what you're doing, and once you get it established, it's a cheaper medium for interrelating to your customers and letting them interrelate with you. The trick is, and having watched the pain that we're going through trying to put it into place, the difficulties or the lack of understanding of the implementers of businesses. So if you're going to go into an online structure, what I've found in our small time is those that are selling you the product and their understanding of your company is very limited. And I was of the opinion that they would know what they were doing. They don't. They're terribly intelligent in the technical side of it, but the integration of what they're selling you into your business is something that really they need to stop and think about, because the gentleman that I'm dealing with two different businesses. One's the software for the online's coming out of Germany, and it's one of probably the better ones in the world. And the company that we're dealing with on the retail implementation side of point of sale and warehouse management. And I spoke to the head of both of those companies and I said, you people don't really understand our business. What they think we are, they kept referring to us as, you're like fashion. Yes, we are a fashion business, but we don't sell clothes. And they just could not get the connection because they had never been into one of our stores and we didn't think to take them. So you can blame us for not taking them. But if you're talking to a software business to do certain parts, ask them seriously, do they know who you are and what you do? Because you might get a rude shock, they don't. They're selling you what they want to sell you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to fit to what you are. And we were going to go live with all of this on the 18th of February. We've drawn a line in the sand, it will be the 13th of May. We've had 4 months of putbacks because there were so many issues. That is probably not an unusual story for many people in this room, but it was somewhat of a shock to me that the people making the product and bringing it to our company didn't understand who and what we are. And we've probably learned a lesson rather slowly, but we've certainly said, no, let's get it right before we go to bed. And they've been somewhat surprised in reverse that we've said, no, we will wait until we get it right, because when you go out to the marketplace, you only get one hit at the customer. If we give you a bad experience, you'll walk away from us. So we're hoping that we don't do that. Not saying we won't, but we're hoping we don't.
So with your pricing, you and I have been talking about this, but the products are priced the same online as in the stores.
Yes.
So just describe your online retail strategy and just how important it is today to your business and how important you believe it will be in the next 2 to 3 years.
Look, it's going to become, already it is a successful business. When you look at this time last year, the sort of numbers that were being put around would be 6-7%, pardon me, of a company's turnover. And that was where it was sitting about 12 months ago. I was only reading, I think this morning or yesterday morning, that the Marks and Spencer's, their online business is now about 15%, and I think some companies are showing up towards 20-25% of their businesses online, which would tell me that some people are going to miss out and some people are going to get a lot more. The Australian average appears to be 3 to 4%, which says we're quite a way behind Europe and America. We are. But one thing about Australians is they pick up on technology very quickly, and hence it's probably to our detriment not so much in my industry, but certainly the fashion industry is clopping it in the neck, because the Australian consumer wants that experience. We didn't give it to them, so they've gone offshore, and we know plenty of people that they can. But I'm comfortable with the online and the threat of online. I believe, and that's why we went out and probably for a small business like ours, went and bought a platform that was above what we need. There's no doubt about it. It has the capacity to do a damn sight lot more than what we'll extract out of it. But my reason for doing that was we're not just competing with Australia, we're competing with Bloomingdale's in New York, we're competing with John Lewis's in London, we're competing with who knows whom all around the world. Your competition isn't just here. I actually use that in reverse when I'm talking to Pakistanis. They think their competitors up the road in Faisalabad. I say, no, he's not, he's in Shanghai. Because it is a wide world and everyone is your competitor. So in presenting your face to the world online, you need to be as good as others can look at you, look at what you're involved in elsewhere. So that's how I see the online. I see it as it doesn't frighten me at all. We're going to use it to our advantage to be disseminating information. I think that's a very big tool that it has for everyone. You can look at what people are doing, you can assess, you can do your research, and then you can go out and do your business if you so desire, or you can do it online from home when it suits you. So no, I'm very positive about it. And I'm not, even with Mr. Harvey, whinging about the fact that my competitors overseas can avoid the GST. I think that's what it is. Get yourself organised to match what you have to do in-house. And I was in China, I'm not sure when it was, might have been this time last year, and I was driving along and we had a lady from the Chinese COSCO, I think they're called, shipping business, and she just had a little boy, and one of the girls with me, I said, show her our website. And anyway, we were able to show a boy's quilt cover for $15 a set, and she said, I can't buy that in China for that price. I said, I know you can't, because we don't actually get this from China, we get it from Pakistan, and they're much cheaper than China, and China is actually recognising that today. They've got problems. They're looking to import from Bangladesh because they're too dear for their own customer base.
So let's come to your key differentiators. Now, I mentioned visual merchandising, your design philosophy. What do you see as your key differentiators from your competitors?
When we started, I suppose, I said of us, and I'm going back a wee way in time here, we opened stores of 600 metres. Now, most specialty retailers in our field would have been 60 to 80 to 100 square metres. So technically, we were a bit like a Bunnings in our industry, and Bunnings, I might add, hadn't been invented at that stage. And we took the view that we had to be, and I know this is against the rules too, all things to all people, pretty much. Because the one problem with Australia, there's no one here. I know I'll get shouted down. I'm of the belief we need a stronger population base to, and everyone says, I don't want any more people around me, thank you. But we can't have the industry that we need because we don't have enough people. So if you're running a business, have a look at what the heck you're doing. And in our case, we were running a bed linen business, and we had to get a snippet from each factor and each sector of business. Now, you will find when you do that, you're better at one part of it. So we made an attempt to be the best in the middle where most people were, and not so flash on the shoulders, but don't not do it. And to do that, we needed more space. The next premise about what we were about when we started way back when was be very conscious of cost. We've always been extremely conscious of cost, because if you want to be a value for money offer, which we choose to be, you can't be overpaying for your retail space or anything else. And if you want a large space, you can't be in a major shopping centre. It doesn't go hand in glove, because most small entrepreneurs and businesses are in 100 to 200 metre spaces at most in large shopping centres. So we had to go outside, and then this ties back in with my particular point of view, which is different to others. You've got three major costs in retail. You've got your rent, your wages and your marketing. Now, if you're in a major shopping centre, your major cost will probably be rent, so you don't have enough money to be a marketer. By not being in a major shopping centre, I was then able to spend the difference on marketing, which means you then get a profile, and on you go. So you're building a whole host of things because you aren't tied down with an excessive cost. And then width and breadth of store, well then that morphed as we went along and changed.
Now, you've taken us through some of the challenges in the retail sector, but for an entrepreneur wanting to enter the industry, what advice would you give him or her?
Don't. I think if you're wanting to go into the retail business, I think you've got to have a look at what's out there, and it's all out there. What are you going to do differently to make it your niche in the marketplace? How are you going to differentiate yourself from the 55,000 people that are already out there doing it? What do you do? So you have to do a bit of serious research. I'm sure everyone would be told the same thing. Serious research of what's out in the marketplace. Where are you going to take a different tack? There's quite a lot of companies that are starting up now, and you look at them and they've got a completely different edge to what they're doing. I mean, I would love to go out and open lolly shops. I've always had a fascination with lollies, and I believe that if you wanted to do it, I reckon you could have a really wonderful business selling lollies in a different way to the way that they're currently sold around the world. I was in a store in Frankfurt, and it's an international business, but I was fascinated by how they had their surfwear, and the whole window as you walked towards this was the waves rolling in and crashing all around the clothing. It felt like you're at the beach. So you've got to probably spread your mind a lot further than what we all now do. And as we go through our business, we have our model, and as I keep saying, we don't want to frighten the horses and change it too dramatically because people will forget what the heck you were doing. But if you were starting out, I'd be saying, what's out there in the world? How can I do a better job? One of the great issues is service. I constantly read there's no service. Big stores, they don't look after you, they don't talk to you, they don't do this, they don't do that. We have always tried to provide service. Whether we do it well or badly, that can be the factor of in-store management. But we do pay to have people in the store. And doing things like that, what do people really want? Where are they coming from? Say product, service, what's my differentiation? Then how do I manage to keep it all afloat while people find me? One of the great troubles with business, and it's an age-old comment, 10 start and nine fail. If that's the percentages are shocking. I'm reminded of a friend of mine who was in the menswear business, and I told him I was about to open a store in Toowoomba, and he was in Toowoomba. Why would you want to go to bloody Toowoomba? I said, it's a fine town. There's a lot of people there. He said, oh, bugger me. He said, they don't shop. I said, what do you mean they don't shop? He said, well, they just stand and look at you. I said, oh, they're farmers. I said, they're going to be very careful. I said, they're used to buying bulls and they don't want to rush in and make sure they get a bad one. So they're going to give you a long time. And he shut shop and left. We stood the test of time by letting the farmers wander around and sniff us and give us a bit of a kick in the shins. And after a while, it became one of our best stores. But the trick there was, had that been my first shop, I might have failed because they were slower to pick up on us because they were more cautious beings than, say, an impetuous person in the main street of Surfers Paradise.
Let me take you to leadership. What do you think are the key personal attributes of a leader? Tell us about your leadership style and what you focus on, what you say no to.
Here we go. Most of my employees are women, so saying no is not an option. It's a matter of doing it as best you can and getting around them. That'll do. I think giving people the authority to do the job and having the trust in them and letting them down will do it. When they make a mistake, by all means correct them. But if you've given someone the job to do it, then let them do it. And be brave enough to assume that most people are decent and they will be doing the best that they can. I find that in the main, people don't let you down. And I've always done it that way. I mean, we've opened shops and I've never even been to the damn things. I've actually opened one and shut it and didn't get there because it's not a good look, but I did. It wasn't a good shop though. It was a short-term one. But what we do as a business is we have people entrusted and empowered to do the job. And in the main, you let them down, we'll do it. You don't take your eye off the ball. I could probably change that slightly and say we had a store where there was a lot of... You quickly get information that things aren't all right. People will ring you, you'll get abuse, you'll get customer complaint. And this particular store, we found out, we asked the manager to come up. We did some research as to what was going wrong. We then spoke to her and said, this is where it's all going pear-shaped. She didn't know. She had problems at home, which were fine, that was that. But she was bringing all that baggage into our business and then upsetting people within the store. We spoke to her at length about it. She broke down. We said, we're not here to get rid of you. We're just here to explain what's going wrong. Can you go back and start to do it well? Nothing changed, same marketing, same thing. That store went back up by about 30%. She didn't know. She was closed in with her problems. So we called her in, had a chat. She went back to her ways about 18 months again. We said, you've gone and done it again. She quickly realised, and both occasions after that she wrote me a rather nice letter saying, thank you, I didn't know what I was doing. But probably in most cases, not always, but in most cases, if you're open, even-handed and decent about what's going wrong or what's going right, tell people. When they're doing it well, and I mean, we have plenty of failings in our company because we've probably been a bit too lean in our management staff. We don't have enough of them. We've fixed that in the last 18 months. But we were remiss in that area. But when we gave someone the authority to do it, we trust them to do it. So I think I do trust.
So you've spoken about action orientation, you've spoken about trust, openness. Take us through the DNA, the culture at Pillow Talk, and let us know about what you've had this recent growth surge. So it's a pretty significant growth surge, and take us through the impact that growth surge has had on the people and the culture at Pillow Talk.
Yeah, horrendous. Firstly, why we went on the growth surge is an opportunity arose because, as has been noted before I sat down here, business has been tough, and if you're in retail, most of you may well be in accord with that, and opportunities arose. Once we made that decision, off we went to do it all, and regrettably at the same time we then decided to implement new software programs, acquire a new warehouse, move warehouses, and open, and since we've started this little surge, open about 15 stores. The pressure that brings to bear on every person and every facet of the company is far too much, and it's been a constant round talking to the various key people, and not just the key people, the people who are working in the warehouse, calling them together and explaining what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the end result will be. If we do all of this, my belief is that you will have a better work environment within X amount of time. Regrettably, the time that I originally suggested has gone back a couple of months. That wasn't anything to do with us. It was a critical factor of another flow on from government decisions with the person whose warehouse we're acquiring. But I suppose what we've tried to do is explain and bring the people along with us so that they understand what we're doing, where we're going, and why we're doing it. But certain people within in the business, some didn't want to be a part of it and they've moved on. Others have certainly felt the pressure, and there's been lots of moments when there's been crises and we've had to sit down and probably rescue people from the chasm that they're looking at. It's not an easy thing.
So how do you select the people that work for you? What behaviours do they have to demonstrate?
Well, I think it's a trial and error thing. One thing that usually I'm a little careful on when someone says, this suits me, that type of person, I think, well, maybe I better be careful with that, because what I'd like them to think is, I'm here to help you and you can help me. My philosophy has always been, if you're doing the right thing by the customer, they will eventually do the right thing by you. But in reverse to that with employees, ask of them, I suppose, leading questions, what are your skills and da-da-da-da-da, but little things that they might say, you might think, well, they're not necessarily here to be with us, they're here to just take from us. So I'm looking for people who want to be part of what we're about, and I suppose express the vision of where we're going, what we're doing, and then hopefully they embrace that. We have an awful lot of people that have been with us forever, and that can be a good and a bad thing. And we find that when people join us, the culture of what we're about tends to suit them. I say we've got a lot of women working for us. Our product category interests them, so they like being in there. As we've gone through the last 3 to 4, 5 years, as we've developed stores, the general feel of them. My mother, who's getting into her dotage but lives in Toowoomba, tells me regularly that lots of her friends just love going into the stores and wandering around. I say, what are they buying? Nothing. I say, not much use to me. But that's what they do. So as we're doing our layouts and our whatever, people enjoy what we're about. It's a different thing. I travel around the world, not often, but indeed not long ago I didn't have a passport, but things changed. And we don't exist anywhere. We are somewhat unique. The fact that we started here in downtown Brisbane is a bit of a surprise, but you go elsewhere, large corporations like Bed Bath and Beyond, which would be similar to us, they don't just do what we do. I had a gentleman in yesterday asking me to, can we do a better range of curtains and things? I said, only if I put another 700 metres onto the side of the buildings, because the space we have is there to do what we do. So it's a space representation, and then it's an expression of what we do and how we bring it all to the table.
So Heath, how do you go about improving skills, critical thinking, decision-making in your organisation?
God, I'm probably the worst person to do that. I think what we have done, we only had a limited management team in March last year. Since then, we've brought in 5 different people. So we've gone out to acquire those skills and break up the business into almost, I call them pods or business units, so that you've got an operations area with stores and warehousing, you've got finance, you've got HR departments, and you've got buying and marketing, and you've got IT, and now we've got e-commerce. I think that's 6 different areas that we've brought the business into, and we're still doing all the pain. We haven't had any gain from it yet. My great belief is once we get to the end of October, we should start to be seeing everyone doing what they're employed to do rather than cope with the chaos that I've thrown at them. But I don't know that I can say that I can take someone and build them up, but bring in a person who has a skill far greater than yours in an area where you need more expertise. So probably we've gone to the market to get it rather than do it in. We try to, in the main, promote from within. That's always been something we've done, where rather than go out looking. But once you get to skills where we don't have an HR department, we can't promote from within an HR department we don't have. We didn't have an operation structure. We had me making decisions, which wasn't the smartest. So go and get some. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Where do you feel you lost it? Where do you feel that? I mean, tell us about your appetite for risk. But where do you feel you lost the moments where you felt this was not going to work, and how did you succeed?
Probably I've never felt losing it in the retail side. Only when I went outside of that into other areas, at that point I instantly lost it because we didn't have the skills and we didn't have the time to devote to doing it. But on the retail side, I've never felt out of my depth, which probably says I didn't extend myself too far. I could say I'm out of my depth now, but fortunately we brought people in to keep me afloat. And we couldn't do what we're doing today without the first going off to get people in to work in the various pods, as I call them. I think retail to me, it's a science you can't teach. And I've always felt that I've known where we're going and what we're doing, and we've done it incrementally. We haven't rushed off and done, first off we've done this, so we've got the stores and then we've taken ourselves overseas to get partnerships with mills and things like that. So bit by bit we've worked within the constraints of what's available to us, and then as we've had the luxury of making that next step, we've gone and done it. So it's been a fairly conservative approach because we've been 35 years rushing to where we are. And that's my approach, but it wouldn't necessarily be someone else's. So I've never felt great fear about what we're doing.
But you've got this focus on financial discipline, efficiency, you've got a highly conservative financial structure, yet you're seen as a well-calculated risk taker.
Well, I think that's the luxury of probably being conservative initially and then taking your opportunities, because they do present. The world does this, it doesn't do that. And when it's doing this, I've always gone, I'll have a crack up there. So it's counter-cyclical. And it's worked for us because what it then gives you as a conservative person is, I've always operated on the theory of, can I get my money back? Because that meant I can have another bet. Whereas if you're pushing the limits too far, and many do push the limits, and they certainly go a lot further than we ever have, but also when you're pushing the boundaries, you can also stumble and fall quite quickly. So my process has been wait for the opportunities and then have a serious push. You could then say, well, hang on, in the last 12 months, why have you been so manic? Because I use the thought that it's really a defensive play because retail is under pressure. There's no doubt about it, it's under pressure. If you're a retailer, and I'm sure there are some in here who are in shopping centres, you almost need a 4% growth per annum to tread water. Now, the problem is, if the online business is taking 4, 5 or 6% of turnover, as it is, and it's going to grow, that makes it bloody difficult for shopping centres to grow their business. There has to be casualties. So in that whole process, and it's been rushing at us much faster by the hour in the last 18 months to 2 years. It wasn't as critical a few years ago. So as a business, I'm looking at that whole holocaust rushing at us. What are we going to do to make sure that we're not part of the displacement of furniture? So that's what we went and did. So opportunity arose. We were there in a position to meet it because we had been fiscally conservative for 15 or 20 years. Now, you can't do that if you're just starting out. I'm not being a smarty pants in that respect. But for us, opportunity presented, we were there to grasp the nettle, and we've done it. There's been a few issues along the way.
We're going to get some questions from you very shortly. Just want to ask a couple of other questions. A recent HBR, Harvard Business Review article, said the 4 distinct skills lacking in most entrepreneurs are 1, managing themselves, 2, planning and organising, 3, analytical problem solving, and 4th is empathy. Now, how does this relate to you, and what personal skills do you think you've brought to the company?
The first one I'm hopeless at. I'm not too bad at empathy because I do think empathy is a wonderful thing to be aware of and have, and to be putting yourself in the other person's position and understanding. So don't be too proud to clean the toilet, won't hurt you, even at home. Also, analytics and planning, well, from day one, I suppose I've always been an assessor of what's capable of being done. So I feel comfortable with that one. The third one, I think I'm going to miss out on one of those.
There was analytical problem solving, planning and organising, managing themselves.
Yes, I think most of those, as an entrepreneur, you will be doing. I don't have a trouble with those, but I think as a self-manager, and I've never had a PA, and probably that's been my great failing, someone to rustle me and get me organised, because I tend not to do that side of it well, and I think it is probably a critical thing that you should be able to plan your day. I have taken a small note out of those who are much smarter than I and write down what your priorities are to achieve in a day. I think if you do that and say, I've come in to do these tasks, you may get interruptions, it doesn't happen, but it won't do you any harm to have a plan of what you want to achieve by knock-off time. I have to tell you, I didn't do it when I was younger, and I've only just started to do it, and I'm 61. So, but
let's get some questions from the audience. You right?
Hello, my name is Nikki. Heath, thank you very much for today, Heath, for your candour and openness about your business and your growth and so forth. When you spoke at the beginning, you talked about how in when you started in 1977 that people took a risk on you, suppliers helped you and worked with you and, you know, took a punt and gave you those opportunities for yourself and your partner to move forward. Do you think in the current environment that there's the same appetite that businesses or backers would have? And do you think that if you were to do this today as a young man in his 20s to go out and start his own business, that you would be just as successful?
Definitely not. And unfortunately, I don't think there is any appetite at all from the supply side, because I'm a retailer, of that industry to at the moment, support someone starting out, because nearly every facet of financial support, there's an awful lot of negativity. Banks are reluctant to support people. They'll run away from doing it. But in reverse to your query, it may well be required, if we're talking retail and wholesale, for wholesalers to suddenly start being partners with retailers in a different fashion. But the great trouble that does is how well resourced are your suppliers, because if they're supporting you, they've got to have absolute trust in you, and if you haven't been dealing with them for quite some time, the probabilities of them having that trust are rather remote, because too many people might get support, fail, and then they're left holding the bag. And so I don't believe it's possible. We were talking about luck, and I was lucky that we started when we did. I think someone observed the other day, who's the boss of I don't know, can't think of the large
Give me a hint.
Computer company. Not
Steve Jobs, no.
Not the other one. What's his name? Mr. Gates.
Bill Gates, yes.
Mr. Gates. Thank you. I'm a techno head personified. It was noted that had he been born 2 years either side of when he was born, he would not have made it. So when you are talking about success, for everything else you do, there is luck, unfortunately, and that's paramount. Yeah, luck and timing, and we were certainly there. If I'd been trying to come out with the continental quilt angle to my company in 1988, I was too late. So everything you do everything right. I always say there's 28 things to get right in retail. I don't know if there are, but get one of them wrong and you'll probably struggle with it, because unfortunately that's just the nature of the game.
Tell us how in the hell you sold $100 pillows.
I didn't know you couldn't. When we first started, it was classic, because we were up in Ann Street and everyone said you cannot make a business work by being in Ann Street. There's no passing traffic, there's nothing. I stood there one morning when people left the train. There was an awful lot of passing traffic. They were hurrying somewhere else. However, this is a bit naughty, we had a shower screen, and it was a picture of a naked Adonis man. And when you walked past it, it was his buttocks and his torso and everything else. But half those people walking by were young women. And every so often one would look and stop, and they'd come back and come in and go, oh, not so exciting. But, good morning, madam, can we help you? What were you looking for? So there was passing traffic. It was just a matter of how you arrested them in the first instance without being arrested yourself.
That's good. What other question? Any other question? Yes.
Jeff Hines. Do you have a board or an advisory board, or who do you look to bounce problems off and difficulties?
We don't have a board. We're a most unreconstructed vehicle. In terms of bouncing ideas off, we have a whole host of women who are in most of our senior executive positions, and they are fashion forward. Our business is fashion. The only probably part that I'm playing in the process now is we are out there doing things and I'm the brake on the runaway train. But no, we don't have a board. We have regular discussions, but we are a fairly private structure, and I wouldn't suggest that we won't be heading there, but we've got to where we are without it. So the answer is at the moment, no, we don't. We're a fairly unfashionable company of some size.
Another question? Yes.
Heath, my name's Brent. I'm going to get the first number wrong, but I think one of the marketing slogans is 80% of Queenslanders live within 20 minutes of a Pillar Talk store. Is that?
That's it.
80? Cool. And so obviously where you set up your new stores, and what that tells me that you're very specific in terms of driving distance and how close people are to your stores. What's the most important thing when you look for in terms of tapping into that market that you haven't had before? And specifically, when setting up a new store, what's the most important thing for you in location terms?
We have improved on our location structure by moving into New South Wales, because when we were in Queensland, we grew with the whole state. So that was fine. Once we went over the border into New South Wales, we quickly learnt that no one cared about us. And now I am more specific about paying a higher rent than I ever would have in Queensland for a more prominent position on the main road. So we don't have the luxury of everyone knows you, because we've had that happen up here. But now that we're moving further afield, we've got to be more specific and look for prominence of position and get as much as we can for as little as we can afford to pay. So that's probably where we differ now to what we were doing. I think it's 90%, by the way, and when I made that up, it was wrong. It's now pretty right, because I did the maths and we were a bit skinny because we were going to be opening in 2 other stores and we got held up. Hence, I was out there telling lies for a few days.
Heath, Steve Jobs' success was described as a result of his unusual combination of technical smarts, strategic vision, flair for design, and sheer force of character. How do you fit that?
Oh God, missed out on the 4 of them. Probably force of character would, in my case, I don't think I'm a sociopath or a psychopath. I have read quite a bit on sociopaths, and some of their attributes fit me quite well. But force of character and believing on what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then having the conviction to damn well go and do it. Now, that's a slightly different. We've just had the unfortunate passing of Maggie Thatcher, and she's being noted as a conviction politician. Well, I think if you want to do something, explain what you want to do, tell people what the causes and effects of what you do will be, and then go out there and do it. And don't do it with any form of maliciousness. Do it on the basis that you're out there to do the right thing by A, your staff, B, your customer, and anyone else that's going to bump into your suppliers and your landlords. Because if you're doing all of those things correctly, you've got some chance of at least honouring your word. Other things that are attributed to different people, I don't know. I think that's for others to judge whether you are or you aren't. I don't reflect well on myself, I'm sorry.
No, it's interesting too that Colin Powell, the former Secretary of Defence, described Margaret Thatcher as having vision, purpose, focus, determination. I think that'd capture you.
Yeah, it could well, because I've never believed that I wouldn't succeed. I mean, that's an odd thing to feel, but I've always just assumed this is what we will do. Possibly that goes back to when I was a little boy and I could run like the wind. I had big brothers who wanted to belt the hell out of me. And I could always run fast, and I always thought I just came first, so that was normal. But it isn't. I understand that in real life it isn't normal, but once we went out into this wide world of retail and the thugs, and when we started, just as a little bit of aside, quite a lot of people tried to shut us down. There was a lot of pressure put on people who were supplying us not to deal with us. And then you had to articulate why that particular person should deal with you, knowing full well that they were being screwed by someone quite slightly larger than you were. But been there, done that, and I suppose now I'm the ogre.
Yeah, a question? Yes, just over here. Thanks, Chrissy. Are you right? Sorry.
My name is Andreas Obermeier. Thanks very much for your presentation. I really liked it. I could imagine that in your industry, customer preferences changes from time to time. And I would be very much interested how you actually pick up what customers want, and how you pick up the change in customer preference. There is this thing, because you mentioned Steve Jobs before, and Steve Jobs was famous for definitely not doing focus groups and all this kind of stuff. So I'd be very interested in that.
Okay, I'm with Steve Jobs. We don't do focus groups. But We do research. By that I mean we have people who travel around the world. They go to fairs, they go to cities in London, Paris, New York, Amsterdam, wherever. We deal with all sorts of suppliers, and it's probably almost a shame. There's not a lot of difference out there in the world, because in this day and age everything's instant. We can see what London's doing overnight. It's online, you can see it all. But we make an effort to go out and take themes or concepts or colour, and our industry is colour. We probably then dictate it to you by force of marketing. So we work within a parameter of colour, and then we have prices and substrates of fabrications. Then we bring that in and build it all together into a look. But we are constantly assessing where the world's going, and it comes from the fashion industry. So the colours and designs that are out there, we're picking on it and then bringing it into it. But we then have to be mindful there is differences between New South Wales, southern New South Wales, Victoria to Queensland to Cairns, and we have to be conscious of that.
So tell us about Cairns and colour.
It's bright. But it's interesting, the pro rata per head of population in 1974, I wasn't in business then, but this was a fascinating bit of information. The gentleman who was the biggest blanket manufacturer in Australia was a gentleman called Nathan Schaefer, and he was talking to me one day and he said, the biggest sales per head of population of blankets in Australia is in Cairns. Now everyone fell about laughing and said, what rubbish, couldn't possibly be. It was, because it took me a little while to work out why that was. That was when Cairns was becoming an international tourist place, and they were building a lot of hotels. There was about 35,000 people living there, but they built all these hotels and they all wanted 1 to 2 blankets per room. So Nathan didn't get that, but all he thought was, what the hell are those bloody North Queenslanders sleeping under? It's mad. And that was an interesting thing. But with Cairns, you've got to regionalise your areas and make sure that you are dealing with colour and fashion and style and weights and whatever else it is that your business is. Don't send a whole host of brown coats to Cairns if you're in the fashion industry. It won't be a good look, because they don't do it. But don't in reverse send a whole lot of bright colours to Melbourne. They won't have a bar of that because they're wearing black and grey. So it is regional, and then it comes down to people are all different. We think we're all the same. We are, but we're not. And so you need to be very conscious of that if you've got a spread of businesses we now have from Victoria to northern Queensland. There are differences, and be aware of it. And to some degree it's trial and error, but across the board we're fashion forecasting on your behalf for next May right now. And I hope you like the colours we're going to bring you.
Final question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, particularly the honesty in the questions you've answered. What percentage of your business is manufactured overseas and what percentage locally?
Right, that's a good leading question. Well done. I'll wear it on the chin. 98% of textiles in the world right now are made in Asia. It was about 1985 or 86, it was Senator Button who took off the safeguards for the textile industry here in Australia. And from that point onwards, as tariffs were reduced, the manufacturing part of the Australian textile business collapsed. I've been with it since 1970, so I've seen it where it was. It was slowly failing, and then it went pear-shaped from that point on. One of the great problems, I'll pose a question to you. How many kilometres of fabric do you think we have to print to show you one quilt cover design? Anyone want to have a guess? Okay, I'll tell you, it's 10 kilometres. Now, that equates to about 2,000 pieces. And we run 800 different quilt covers. Most companies run about 50. We're obviously stupid. Now, what it means is the amount of volume required to run a textile business, and I touched on this a bit earlier on this evening when I was observing the trouble, unfortunately for Australia, is we don't have enough people here. We've got a lot of space between drinks, and we can't support an industry. If we had a mill operating, The mills that we're dealing with, I was in a mill the other day in India. It's 1,300 acres under roof. It had 20,000 looms, 10,000 doing an intermediate quality and 10,000 doing a good quality under one building. It was about 4 acres. The turnover of that business, it's in bed linen, is 1.9 billion. These are numbers that we can't comprehend. It's one of the mills we deal with, but they are massive. And that's what you're up against as an Australian manufacturing business. I don't have an answer for it. I've thought long and hard. I don't think it's a good thing because just the other day, the shipping lanes from China to Australia were left empty. Now, that was a ploy to get the price of freight up. But we had certain items that we then had to get air freighted down because we were caught short and they were in a document going out in 2 weeks' time. That was a scramble to try to rectify that problem. So we are terribly vulnerable by not having our industry here, but the economics of the system and the sheer volumes and cubic structure that's out there, we can't cut it. It's not pleasant, it's the facts. So, yes, I would think there's hardly anything that we range, and there's 2 angles to that. Consumers want Australian made, I won't deny it. They will not pay. It's a constant debate. There's a small percentage that will, but in the main they won't and they can't. And the industry, because we can go offshore now and look at Bloomingdale's or Walmart or whatever, and why can't you do it for $9? Just as a rough guide, our cost per hour of labour in our stores is just on $25 an hour when you add up hourly rate plus superannuation, plus this, plus that, plus everything else. Taxes and God knows what else. The hourly rate for an employee in our industry in America is about $9. Now, we have to work, it's not an excuse, we've got to work all that out, and how do you remain a viable enterprise against those particular competing factors? It's not a simple one, it's not a pleasant one, the realities are that, understand it and cope with it. But I don't think we will have a homegrown textile industry while our population base is what it is. It won't happen.
Please thank Heath Goddard on that uplifting note. To give a vote of thanks, could I ask Professor Peter Little, Deputy Vice-Chancellor?
Well, Heath, thank you for a wonderfully entertaining, refreshing and encouraging interview. I think the business people here with us tonight and those who are watching online or those who will watch the online presentation in the coming weeks will be very encouraged by your journey and what you've done to succeed and what you continue to do. Just a couple of things I'd pick up on. You used the word once tonight, foresight. And the word foresight is something that we often gloss over, but when you think about it, it means seeing things before they happen and seeing things before others. And I think great entrepreneurs, and I include you amongst that, Heath, in many of the things you've said tonight, reveal your ability to see things that others don't see, or to see them before others see them. And that's the mark of a truly successful business person, and to have the determination then to act on the opportunity. The other thing is business judgment, and the calls you've made, and in particular to expand your business, both bricks and mortar and online at a time. Well, you had no choice with online, but to undertake that massive expansion at a time when virtually every retailer in the country is lamenting the difficulties of succeeding in business is truly remarkable. And I just finish this vote of thanks with an anecdote, and I don't know how true it is, but it's a nice way to finish. But somebody very close to you told me recently that Heath's the sort of guy that if a miller from China or India or Pakistan comes to Heath and says, look, we've got this huge supply that we can't move, would you like to take some? Heath will say, no, I'll take the lot and I'll build a new warehouse to house it. And I think that that's actually a true story, and I think that's something you didn't touch on that underpins the recent burst of your expansion. And I think it just takes a special business mind, a successful record, and a great confidence in your ability to move the stock and to be in command of the retail business. So Heath, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story. Thank you for sharing it online and demonstrating a story of a great Queensland game changer. Thank you very much. And Ray, can I also thank you for another wonderful interview. As always, really a deep and insightful and just a very engaging interview. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming tonight, and we hope that you'll be back for the third in the series, which is on the 29th of May, when Ray will be interviewing Nicole Hollows, a very interesting game changer, a woman who broke the glass ceiling by becoming first Australian CEO of a mining company. And not only that, but she was a game changer as a CEO in the way she ran the business and ultimately presided over a year or 18 months of tough takeover negotiations. So we'd love you to be with us, and also to recommend to your friends and colleagues to attend the remaining events. If you like what you heard tonight, please encourage your friends and colleagues to access the SLQ, State Library of Queensland website, because the interview tonight will be available sometime next week, as is the first in the series. And we would really encourage you. We want to spread the message of great Queensland entrepreneurs. So thank you very much, and please come and enjoy some refreshments on the Queensland Terrace just outside the main doors. Thank you.